I'll never forget this moment I pressed that garage door remote and heard the motor hum to life. Not the usual feeling of coming home, but something between disbelief and the urge to laugh right out loud. There it was, clear as day, Karen's big glossy black SUV sitting smack dab in the middle of my garage, like it belonged there. Engine quiet doors, locked, not a soul in sight. You ever have one of those moments where your brain just refuses to catch up with your eyes? That was me frozen for a good 30 seconds, trying to process why the queen of the HOA would park her land yacht in my space without so much as a text, a note, a heads up. Nothing. Then something in me just snapped, you know what I mean? Instead of losing it or running to her front door, I did something petty, something that felt way too satisfying at the time. I hit that button again and watched the door come down, sealing her precious SUV in there like I was putting away leftovers. I had no intention of ever eating. And let me tell you, if you've never trapped your HOA president's car in your garage, well, you're missing out on a rush of pure unfiltered justice, or maybe stupidity, depending on how you look at it. Now, if you've never met Karen Mitchell, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine someone who treats the neighborhood like her own personal fiefdom, clipboard in hand, tape measure on her belt, and a laminated rule book she'd probably take to the grave if she could. She had this weird hobby of measuring grass. I mean literally dropping to her knees with a ruler to make sure your lawn didn't dare cross that 3-inch mark. Once she fined sweet old Mrs. Henderson $50 for having a garden gnome that didn't match community aesthetics. I swear Karen hunted down violations like a bounty hunter, and her black SUV even had custom plates screaming HOA 1. Subtlety was not in her vocabulary. My personal battle with Karen kicked off a couple weeks before the SUV incident, all because I installed a new mailbox. Not just any mailbox, a wrought iron beauty with shiny matching numbers, something you'd see in a magazine. Of course, she said it wasn't approved, slapped a violation notice on it, and demanded I replace it with a standard regulation model in 72 hours. When I pointed out that my mailbox actually met all the postal requirements and looked a heck of a lot better than the cheap ones she wanted that just painted a target on my back. Next thing I knew, she was measuring my grass in 6 different spots, snapping photos of my trash cans from every possible angle, counting Halloween decorations, you name it. Karen had it out for me, and it was only a matter of time before things boiled over. It all really blew up on a random Tuesday. I was in the backyard tinkering with my flower beds when I heard a car door slam. Glancing through the kitchen window, I watched as Karen strutted up my driveway, clipboard in hand, measuring tape, swinging, ready to pounce. But instead of ringing the bell like a normal person, she noticed the open garage door and just drove right in. Parked her SUV dead center, turned off the engine, and stepped out like she owned the joint. No shame, not even a glance back. What happened next? Well, it was almost comical, if it wasn't so intrusive. Karen started poking around my garage, snapping photos of my lawnmower, checking the recycling bins, muttering about unapproved storage methods. She spent a good 15 minutes rifling through my stuff, jotting notes about the bike hanging on the wall, even opening containers like she was some kind of suburban detective. When she finally finished snooping around inside, she left her SUV in my garage, walked out to the front yard, and started measuring my mulch beds and landscaping. Meanwhile, I'm inside watching this whole circus unfold from the window, torn between wanting to laugh and wanting to scream. I tried to keep my cool, telling myself to wait it out, but that SUV sat there for almost an hour, blocking my spot like she was part of the family. That was it for me. I wasn't about to let this go, not after weeks of her power trips and petty fines. So standing there looking at her car taking up my whole garage, I realized she'd finally given me the one mistake I needed. This wasn't just about mailboxes or mulch anymore. It was trespassing, plain and simple. Without hesitating, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Calm as can be, I explained to the dispatcher that someone had parked a vehicle in my garage without permission and that I'd appreciate an officer coming by. While I waited, I checked the footage from my security cameras. Every second of her little escapade caught in HD, clear as day. 20 minutes later, here comes Karen marching back up the driveway, her face locked in that familiar scowl of righteous indignation badge hanging around her neck like she was running for sheriff. She started pounding on the garage door, shouting about property violations and threatening to fine me for my mulch again. When I opened my front door, she didn't even let me say hello before launching into a full-blown tirade, waving her clipboard like she was conducting some orchestra of outrage. She demanded I open the garage immediately, insisting as HOA president she had every right to inspect for compliance issues. I stood there calm as ever and asked her when exactly I'd given her permission to park in my garage or rifle through my belongings. She sputtered something about it being necessary for her inspection duties and that I should be grateful she was keeping standards high. That's when I let her know in no uncertain terms that I had the whole thing on camera, her entering without permission, parking her car, going through my stuff, and by the way, the police would be arriving any minute. You could see the realization hit her, all the color draining from her face. Right on cue. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Chan pulled up. Karen tried to collect herself, plastering on her most professional smile, immediately marching over to the officers, introducing herself as the community leader, explaining she was only there for official HOA business and that I was blocking her from her duties. The officers listened, nodding politely, then asked to hear my side. I pulled up the security footage on my phone, showed them the moment she drove in, poked around, and left her car in my garage without so much as a text. The timestamps made it clear over an hour, zero permission. Officer Rodriguez turned to Karen and asked point blank if she had my permission to enter or park in my garage. She mumbled a half-hearted no, but insisted it was her right as HOA president. That's when Officer Chan calmly explained that being in the HOA didn't grant her any power to enter private property without an invite, and that parking her vehicle inside my house was not just inappropriate, it was trespassing, maybe even unlawful entry depending on her intent. You could see the facade start to crack. Karen's voice got shriller as she insisted community standards came before selfish property rights. Then in a move I still can't believe, she started yelling at Officer Rodriguez, saying he didn't know HOA law, that she'd have his badge if he didn't force me to open the garage immediately. She poked his chest with her finger, demanded to see his supervisor, and called me a criminal for trapping her vehicle. Officer Chan gave her a final warning to calm down and step back, but by then Karen was way past reason. That was the tipping point. Officer Rodriguez quietly took out his cuffs and told Karen she was under arrest for trespassing, harassment, and unauthorized use of private property. He read her rights while she sputtered and pleaded, begging him not to do this, telling everyone how she was just protecting the community. There's something surreal about watching the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, the terror of every lawn and flower pot, standing in my driveway, handcuffed with half the street, peeking through their blinds to see what all the fuss was about. Of course, it didn't end there. Karen's arrest made the local news that night, complete with the footage of her being led to the squad car, clipboard in hand, HOA badge still swinging from her neck. The next day, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Turns out when you harass your neighbors, break the law, and end up on TV, folks don't want you in charge anymore. They voted her out unanimously, conduct unbecoming of a community leader. Her mugshot ran in the local paper right beside a long article about HOA overreach. Suddenly, Karen Mitchell became the poster child for everything wrong with homeowners associations. A few weeks later, I found myself in court watching the judge deliver her sentence. 6 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and $1,500 in fines and court costs. As she stood there, all the fight drained out of her. It hit me that the neighborhood was finally free of her, but part of me wondered if it was really over or just the start of a new chapter in the HOA's long dramatic saga. So what do you think? Was I wrong to shut that garage door, or did Karen finally get exactly what she deserved? I'd love to hear where you draw the line between protecting your home and playing by someone else's rules. Share your thoughts below. Because if you've ever tangled with an HOA, you know every story has two sides, and the debate's never really over.